What's going on, y'all? Welcome back to the Game Time Discussions. I'm Cameron Selby, and we're going to be doing a first look at the Week 9 NFL main slate on DraftKings. I'm excited to break this down because we've got a doozy. All the big dogs are coming to play on this slate. It's an 11-gamer, a lot of fun game, a lot of high totals, all the big names, and we got to figure out who we're going to be playing because there's so many good opportunities, matchups that are going to be rocking the show. It's Week 9 already. We appreciate you tuning in with us throughout the season so far. We're halfway down, halfway to go, and we have a whole lot of profiting to do. So with that said, leave a like, comment, subscribe, tell us what you're doing this week. It's really exciting. I can't wait to break this down, so let's just get right into it. All right, kicking it off, we're going to jump into the highest totals on the slate. So at the very number one, 52.5 point total. It is none other than what has been one of the best matchups to watch, best rivalry throughout the last half decade. It is the Buffalo Bills, Kansas City Chiefs, primetime game on the main slate at least. 3:30 show, Kansas City favored -2, but it is a 52.5 point total. So they expect some fireworks. This isn't an ugly 20-17 game that we might have seen in the last couple of occasions. They're expecting points, and if that's the case, it's going to be really exciting to target that game. Chicago Cincinnati coming in next. I know that's kind of a weird game, but not either team really planning out or panning out how we anticipate. There's a lot of inconsistency up and down, but 52.5 total is more than enough to gauge my interest. So I will be playing a ton of that game depending on the price. Next up, you got a interesting total of 15.5 between the Steelers and the Colts. If you told me week 1, the Colts at the Steelers was going to be a 50.5 point total in week 9, I would have laughed in your face. I would not anticipate the Daniel Jones versus Aaron Rodgers game, knowing what we know prior going into the season, was going to just be a possible shootout. But Indianapolis is one of the number one score. But Indianapolis is the number one scoring offense in football. They just put up numbers and points and all that fun stuff. They're 7-1. And then the Steelers, the offense at least has not been the problem. It's been more so their defense. And they've been scoring at least 20 points a game in all but one of these occasions in the recent weeks. So that's a fun one. Next up, we're going to go down a little bit, but this is a game that we've always targeted. It's always been a juicy DK fest on this matchup between the Minnesota Vikings, Detroit Lions. Problem is, total's down to 47. And that has a lot to do with Minnesota having a rookie quarterback. And we'll get into the funness of what used to be and with Justin Jefferson against his fellow Detroit Lion foes. But 47.5 point total. Detroit's favored by 9, one of the highest spreads on the slate. If it stays close, this could be a shootout. And if it doesn't, then it could be a one-sided affair. So we'll just have to monitor and see how that game plays out. And I did miss one. The last one, though, is going to be the 49ers at the Giants. Brock Purdy could be returning, and the Giants are going to now be without Cam Scatterbo, who broke his ankle. He's out for the season, but still they're expecting a bunch of points, and that could be the contrarian approach of the high total games because I think the names, for the most part, outside of CMC, aren't going to be as sexy and exciting as the other ones. So with that said, I've been kind of not complaining. It hasn't been a complaint, but the past few weeks, we've been just getting these low, high-priced quarterbacks where we just weren't getting 7K quarterbacks. Now we have 2. We've got Josh Allen at 73, and he has been fine. He has not been awesome. And with that said, 23.5 is cool. He's not really winning you any big slates, big money outside of week 1, where he dropped 42 in a comeback effort. Since then, he's had a couple of low 20s. He's gotten around 23 to 25 in a couple games. He's been fine. Hasn't been as exciting, but he's the highest priced quarterback on the slate. Holmes, on the other hand, is back to fantasy relevance, going for 25 fantasy points in 5 straight games. And he had 26, 23 in the others. He's really only had one dud, and it was the New York Giants game. Weird, gross game. I barely watched it. It was that bad of a football Sunday night game. I can't believe that was even a primetime game. But with that said, it's shootout, it's fireworks, it's the highest total on the slate. These guys have gone off against each other before. Kansas City, it looks like the light show's back. And if that's the case, I'm really excited to see if this ends up being a 38-35 kind of shootout. Buffalo's defense has been susceptible to stuff. They've given up some points and some numbers, but they've also played some not great offenses. So you don't really know what you're getting against them on a week-to-week basis because of the fact that the only teams that they've really truly blown out are the Carolina Panthers, New York Jets. But they've also let Miami stay around. They've let New Orleans stay around. And then they lose games that are kind of low scoring against New England and Atlanta. Weird games. And so with that said, I just anticipate this being a big total game. And I'm really excited because Buffalo's always going to have lower priced receivers because you never know which week What's going to happen is basically going to be James Cook, Josh Allen, and then everybody else down low as tournament plays. And then with Kansas City, everybody's going to be flocking to a Rashee Rice. Not as many to Xavier Worthy, maybe a little more to Travis Kelce now that he's trying to break the all-time Chiefs touchdown record. But I want to get some exposure to that game. So again, I'm flying through first look. So we'll see how pricing looks on the pass catchers on them a little later. Going down though, Justin Herbert against the Titans. Titans have been pretty bad, more so against the run game than the pass game, but back-to-back games where he's kind of gotten back to the relevance. So really strong start to the season. Had a bunch of duds, and then recently he's kind of picked it back up with back-to-back 3-touchdown efforts, and both of them were in blowouts where he was down 3 touchdowns, and then the other one he was up 3 touchdowns. So he can get there. He's probably going to be squeezed a little bit. 6,800 is not too exciting. And then the next two not great matchups, Drake May against Atlanta, who've been pretty solid against as a secondary as a whole. They just get blown out against Tua, who drops 4 touchdowns on them, and they get dropped 30-0 against Carolina. But outside of that, sure, I don't know. But either way, Drake May just continues to have consistency and success. 6 of the last 7 games, at least 21 fantasy points. So the thing is, he's one of the grossest stacking options week in and week out, because I know Kayshon Boutte has had back-to-back strong weeks, but he had multiple duds in between that. Hunter Henry's up and down. Stephon Diggs had back-to-back strong performances, and he's kind of cooled off a little bit. So, and then they just still won't play TreVeyon Henderson. So it's hard to stack him. It's not a great matchup. I'm probably going to be going down or up regardless of these names. But jumping down, Matthew Stafford at home against the Rams. I think that's a strong way to approach and attack this slate. 3 of the last 4 games, at least 3 passing touchdowns. He's been awesome, and I did not expect him to be this awesome as a fantasy player, especially with the lack of rushing upside, but he had the back injury, and he's just still been awesome. Puka's back this week, and so that'll only help it. It's not necessarily going to hurt it, but that said, he had 5 touchdowns in the 1 game without him. So he's just been awesome regardless when it's a good matchup. And it's a fine matchup. And if it stays close and he's involved on all the touchdowns, he can get there. Daniel Jones against the team that is second worst against quarterbacks. 3 straight games, at least 22 fantasy points. He's been just incredible this year. I can't say enough about how well he's done. 200 is a modest price. It's a high total game. I don't know how many people are going to be flocking to him, but his pass catching options are pretty consistent with, like, you know who to stack him with if and when you do. So if he is a low-owned quarterback, which kind of feels like he might be, then it's a good matchup. You know who to stack with, and it's an easy way to get different. And like, it just all makes sense for low 6K. A couple of fun names back-to-back. Caleb Williams, Joe Flacco. This is the second highest total game on the slate, 52 total. Caleb's had back-to-back awful games. There's no denying it, no way around it. And we expected him to have a stronger game this past week. I ended up going with only a small amount of lines and did not play him. But it was a good matchup on paper, and it did not pan out. He had probably his worst overall performance of the season. The week before, New Orleans, they were up the whole game, and is what it is. But either way, not coming into this with momentum. But Cincinnati, they just got, 33 dropped on them by the winless Jets. Their defense is still bad, and Trey Hendrickson was hurt, and I don't think he played. I don't know if he will again this week. But with that said, even if he is playing, it's really tough to not envision this being a pukey, stacky scoring game. We'll pull some ownership, but it's still fun. Joe Flacco, they're just like, let him rip. This is just exactly what we were hoping for when they traded for him. All 3 games, at least 18 fantasy points. Last 2, he's combined for 5 touchdowns, 40-ish pass attempts a game. Has had the 300-yard bonus once. He's taking care of the football. 5,600, his price keeps rising. Once he gets closer to 6K, it's hard to trust and believe in it. But once again, Chicago, not very good. Again, in the secondary, Jalen Johnson's still out. And we know exactly, once again, similar to Caleb Williams, similar to Daniel Jones, exactly who to target as a double stack with him. It is 3 names, and that's it. That is all you're talking about for a main slate. That's a Chase Brown now, who's finally relevant. That's Jamar Chase, who we'll show you later the amount of targets he's been peppered. And then T. Higgins, who probably still a little low price, but even if his price has risen, I think he'll be a solid tournament play, because if he's a low 6K guy, I think he might get squeezed a little bit. Dropping down, kind of some pukey ranges, a lot of Q tags for guys. We'll say Detroit keeps losing secondary guys, and JJ McCarthy, if he's back, we've seen the upside in playing from behind efforts, but I don't love the passing attempts. 21-20 is just not enough. They better hope that he's playing this week, because Carson Wentz now out for the season. He broke his, he separated his shoulder, his something. He broke something, and he's done for the year. He was in immense pain, and I even heard Kirk Herbstreit complaining about it. And it's like, bro, he's got such a thick, like, knee pad looking brace on his shoulder. you got to cut him a little slack, but you did wish that he ended up playing better and not getting blown out in the following or the previous results. JJ McCarthy, 4,900. I don't think many people will play him, but it's worth mentioning. Mac Jones, if Brock Purdy still misses, $5,000. I'm shocked at the price. Against the Giants, they're going to be one of the highest totals on the slate. Against the bottom three team against quarterbacks, $5,000. Very easy to get to if he is going to be playing. If Brock Purdy plays, $5,500. Even in the 2 games that he played, banged up and hampered, still got to 35 pass attempts. He had a couple of picks in each game. Actually has 5 turnovers through the 2 games that he's played. But he's produced. He's thrown for yards. He's thrown for passes. And so he can get it done. 5,500 is not terrible, and he'll be low owned, especially if he plays. Going down, I don't think there's anything lower. I do know that Tyler Shuck is now the starter for the New Orleans Saints. Don't know what that means. In his 1-game sample, they don't score a touchdown. He throws for less than 150 yards, doesn't score a touchdown. I know he's 4,400. That's cheap. I think there's too many good quarterback plays to go that low this week. I don't really love it. The last couple weeks, we've been dealing with not a ton of high upside quarterbacks or mid-tier price quarterbacks. So it was the minimum price guy versus this. Now, all these guys in the 5K range, a lot of them good spots. And then there's so many up top that I'm interested in. So I'm probably not interested in going that route. Going over to the running backs, look at these studs. All of them are playing. And it's going to be crazy to see how the ownership reflects. But Jonathan Taylor, he's my offensive player of the year right now. He is on pace right now for 28 fantasy points a game. And I think I saw a stat where that would put him at second most all time in terms of, I don't know how far they go back to tracking fantasy total scores, averaging 28 points a game, but that would put him amongst the best seasons ever, including the best seasons that we've ever seen of CMC, which we've seen 1,000 seasons. We've seen 25 touchdown seasons or getting up that far. And it's pretty crazy. 9,800 9,800 is a freaking lot of money. And it's not like it's a crazy great matchup. So I don't know. The thing is, I'm kicking myself last week because last week I was trying to decide between Bijan. Jonathan Taylor was only playing one line. And I decided to say, Jonathan Taylor, if they're going to be up 3 scores again, he's not going to be the reason. Boy, he was. He only had 14 touches, still scored 3 touchdowns, still had 174 all-purpose yards. And despite only having 14 touches, had his best fantasy output of the season, 40 fantasy points. You can't really say much about him. The thing is, because of his consistent success, he's going to pull 10 to 15% every week going forward now. And now that he's 9,800, it's just going to be tough to organically just throw in lines. So I feel like people are going to be forcing him in more than playing him. This isn't the best matchup, but that doesn't mean he can't still score 20 points. But now that he's 10K basically, you probably need 30 at that price point, at least 25. And so if he's only involved in 1 touchdown, say he gets 120 all-purpose yards and a touchdown, that's probably not enough. Crazy enough. So as much as I like him, I think I prefer CMC $1,000 less. We just saw Saquon go for 37 points. Finally, the one time we don't invest in you in your revenge game, you go off. But CMC, consistent as they come, and he's basically getting all of it via PPR stats. Finally got the ground game going over the last couple. Did not against Houston because Houston, they were playing from behind. Bad game, obviously his worst output of the season. But we run it back, we ride. They're going to be road favorites. $8,800 is pretty reasonable. I think I prefer, in a nutshell, between these 3 up top, I probably prefer CMC as a standalone play if I had to choose one. Jahmyr Gibbs is not the best matchup, but he finally had his big breakout performance, going over 100 for the first time. He actually had 200 all-purpose yards, just could not be stopped against Tampa Bay. Coming off a bye, going against Minnesota, that game is going to be very stackable, very juicy, and I think he might be squeezed of these guys up top. 8,000 is very rich, and I think it'll be tough. Maybe Bijan, because people are still disappointed in him not going off in a great matchup last week. Them feelings being hurt, seeing that 5 right there, they decided to squeeze him instead of Jahmyr Gibbs. I don't think he'll be as owned as his upside warrants, but at the same time, $8,000, and there's also a elite amount of receivers in that price range as well, so you have to take that into account when it comes down to it. I thought Carolina was just good to go against running backs now. They had multiple games in a row where they just shut down players and value was not hit against running backs that people invested heavily into. And then James Cook just pops off for 200 rushing yards last week. Josh Jacobs has not gotten it going. He has failed to hit that 100-yard mark so far this season, but they're at home. He's a $5 running back, $7,700. Sure, James Cook, once again, I'm surprised that his price is only 72, but once again, 2 touchdown effort, 200 plus yards. After a couple duds before the bye, comes right out, says, "Oh, maybe we should just give him the ball earlier, and not wait too long." And he just pops off. Kansas City has been studly against running backs, though. Last year they were number one. They had a couple of okay performances early in the year, but have really cranked down of late. So $7,200 is fine. It's the highest total game. If you want a Buffalo piece, he's probably the most confident. But can you spend up for him is going to be the question. Kyron Williams, New Orleans has been bad against running backs, and he also has not hit that 100-yard threshold. He's scored some touchdowns, and $6,800 is just kind of a right in the middle price point. I think I probably prefer going down a couple $100, going to Kamani Vidal, who pops off second game out of 3 with over 100 rushing yards. Started out slow. He was averaging like 2.5 yards a carry in the half, and then ends up getting 5 yards a carry and the touchdown. Almost gets the second one, and he just pops off. So he's the guy until Omarion Hampton comes out. And Tennessee's been really bad against running backs. We've been targeting them most of the year. Same with DeAndre Swift. He's really kind of getting it going. 5 of the last 6 games with the touchdown. Even in a negative game script last week, still got 15 fantasy points because he did salvage with the touchdown. But the previous 2 weeks, over 100 yards, and it is the juiciest matchup you can ask for. Dead last against running backs. One of the highest total games, 6,100. Just feels like a disrespectful price point based on the role he's had. Has been getting most of the important touches, and I just don't see that changing this week. So as long as he's healthy, I know he was dealing with the Q tag for a couple straight weeks. That still has not affected his performance a ton. I like his price point a lot at 61. And even on the other side, Chase Brown, like I mentioned, starting to get it going. He was the butt of a lot of jokes, and it had nothing to do with his fault, but just was not getting involved at all. Kept getting hit in the backfield. So many negative runs, so many negative plays. And then back-to-back games, really strong outings. Averaged 6 yards a carry last week. Had 100 yards on just 11 carries the week before. But you see that -8. You see what I'm talking about with the minus yards and getting hit in the backfield so much. But the biggest thing is just, can you score touchdowns? Chicago has been susceptible defensively. They just allowed 2 touchdowns to Derrick Henry last week. And so coming off 2 touchdowns, his best effort of the season. Before that, 100-yard game. So he's starting to pick it up a little bit, starting to become fantasy relevant, and he's sub 6K. So I like him. Don't know how many people are really going to just flock to him, but I think both of those guys, if you're just standalone play, you want a piece of this game just going boom, boom, is a really strong way to start your lines. Going down a little bit, I wanted to mention Jaylen Warren. It's not a great matchup, but it's a high total, and he's kind of really taken away all the a lot of the big reps for the Pittsburgh Steelers in recent weeks. So his snaps have kind of been pretty strong in the games he's played. 80% in week 3, and then he 53% first game back in week 6, then got to 65, 62 the last 2 games, and he's getting basically all the touches. And even though Kenneth Gainwell had a big week in the 1 week he was out, he has not really eaten a ton into production. He has played a lot of snaps. He's been over 30% of the snaps, but he has not had enough impact on Jaylen Warren. So he's going to project very well, $5,500 at home. Not necessarily a 5-box running back, but he's pretty solid, and it's just worth mentioning. And also, want to mention this because this happened on Monday Night Football. Isaiah Pacheco, very into the game on a play that didn't even count because he got called back due to holding. He got hit in the knee, and he limped off pretty heavily. But then after they kind of stretched him out a little bit, he hopped off and was like really excited. So I was like, oh, he's fine. Well, he sprained his MCL, so he's going to be week to week. Usually when you're week to week, you miss at least a game. Kansas City being out or on bye week 10, I would anticipate that he misses. So if he misses, Buffalo has given up a lot of big games against running backs. And I know Kansas City's running attack is not very good at all, but they've been the opponent matchup really good. Kareem Hunt, he just scores touchdowns. That's all he does. That's all he's good at. He had 2 touchdowns last week, had 2 in another showdown week. Basically, if it's a showdown or a big spot, he scores a touchdown. So if he is going to be getting a really safe touchdown bet, then $4,700 really cheap. And then if you don't like that and you want to go to Brashard Smith, who following a big game of having obviously his most opportunities, most of these rushing carries came when they were absolutely blowing them out, threw in the towel, and he was getting all the touches at the very end. But all of this receiving production came while the game was still in play. Mahomes was still in. So most of this fantasy output was with Mahomes in the fold, and they've been trying to get him more involved. He didn't have any catches this past game for the first time in a while, but if and when Isaiah Pacheco, who's been at least averaging about 60% of the snaps throughout most of the season, I think Kareem Hunt will probably more than likely be the 1A, but all of the receiving work goes to Brashard Smith. $4,200. Nobody's going to play him. It's going to be the highest total game. I might sprinkle. I just will say that $4,200. We at this point in the season, unless there's a big injury, there's never really running backs in the below 4,500 range that really pan out, project well. Unless you have like a guy going on IR post prices being released, like we had with with Arizona in a couple weeks back with the Michael Carter, the Ban Knight, or the Mardi Mercado dilemma that we've been dealing with in recent weeks. So 4,200, I'm just saying, I'm interested. All right, now let's go over to receivers. Once again, all the studs are out. This is probably until we get post bye, this is probably the most loaded receiver slate that you're going to have all season. You got Puka Nacua, you got Jamar Chase, you got Amon-Ra St. Brown, Justin Jefferson, Rashee Rice, Devontae Adams, Nico Collins. How do I say I don't like these guys? I don't like this matchup. This guy's ninth again. Like, they're all matchup proof. They're all basically top 10 receivers in the entire sport right now. Puka expected to return to practice. If there's a setback, that's worth monitoring. That inflates ownership to Devontae Adams, and then et cetera and so on. On paper, not the best matchup, but he's been the most matchup-proof receiver. When he was healthy, this game, throw it out the window because he got hurt. He tried to play through it, and it was also negative game script, all that stuff. Never scored less than 24.5 fantasy points, upside of 40, consistently at least 25. Him being 85, I like him and his price point more than these three running backs. Jamar Chase, 42 targets in the last two games. That's not a typo. 42 targets in the last two games. He's been absolutely peppered since Joe Flacco has been in. And when healthy, he's the best receiver in football, or arguably, I don't care about debating it, but he's been performing lights out throughout the entire season. You wish you had more explosive plays, but because of what he was dealing with Jake Browning and a lot of this stuff, majority going without Joe Burrow, he hasn't really had the breakout. They've been just trying to give it to him around the line of scrimmage, and that's kind of eating into his yak. But at the same time, that doesn't matter. It's a PPR league. He's averaging 25 plus in the last month without Joe Burrow. So 8,400. I can't tell you my dog in the fight between these two. Amon-Ra St. Brown has also been awesome. And this is what I wanted to bring up with, and we'll talk about him since they're similar price points together. Amon-Ra St. Brown versus Justin Jefferson in the last 2+ years has paid out so well. Let me read you some of the outputs that he's had in recent games against the Minnesota Vikings. I'll just go the last four since that was 2023 forward. He missed one game in 2023 against them. But other than that, 12 for 106 in a score, 7 for 144 in a score, 8 for 112 in a score, and then most recently 6 for 77 did not score. 13.7 not going to get it done, but he's had 30 points in basically 3 of the last 4 games against the Vikings. And then on the other side, Justin Jefferson, 11 for 223, 6 for 141 in a score, 12 for 192 in a score. Those were both with Nick Mullins, by the way. 7 for 81 in a score. And then most recently, I don't know what happened in the January game, but Minnesota was tapped out. I guess Detroit was tapped out. I don't know. But either way, neither of them worked out in that specific game. Either way, I love the back and forth that they play against. It's expensive. It's hard to play both. But at the same time, I'm really interested in seeing all of these loaded receivers. I mean, once again, Rashee Rice, since he's been back, 3 touchdowns, 2 games, 23 points, 25 points. 76, his price is going up $1,000 every week, and it's warranted. So highest total game going against Buffalo. I completely understand if you want to rock and roll with some Rashee Rice as well. Devontae Adams is a good play. He's a fantastic play if Puka's out. And then Nico Collins, he missed last week due to concussion. You didn't anticipate he'd be back, but it's also worth noting Pat Surtain now is likely going to miss time. So with CJ Stroud starting to get some momentum as a fantasy football player, Nico Collins at 71, he's probably once again be less than 5% owned. And if that's the case, he's just going to be a very solid play. I want exposure to all of them, but I probably got to make some decisions, and I don't know what I'm going to do. It's going to be really tough because I like all of them in all the spots. They're all matchup proof outside of this second, but their best corner, the reigning depoy, Pat Surtain, is likely not going to be available for that game. Going down, Rome Odunze, good spot. He had back-to-back duds and then bounced back in a bad effort from Caleb Williams with over 100 yards. His first effort doing that since week 2. For 3 straight games without a score, he's 6,600. He's kind of stuck in the middle. I like that game environment and matchup. I might sprinkle some Rome once again. Going down, the low 6K, high 5K range is really going to be very fun area because there's a lot of people in environments that are awesome and probably not going to be crazy owned. As an example, wide receiver twos galore. T. Higgins, Jordan Addison, Keenan Allen, Xavier Worthy. Stephon Diggs is kind of like 1A, but it's not like anybody has a clear defined weekly 10 target a game ceiling. But they're all interesting spots and good game environments and all can pan out. And I anticipate the ownership being not so great on any of these guys. Like nobody's going to stand out. Nobody's going to project fantastically, but all of them can have the boom games this week. I did want to mention because off air, I had a buddy of mine of the show ask me, Michael Pittman was being offered for a trade. And I was just like, bro, I know he's catching touchdowns, but it just feels like he doesn't have the upside. Less than 10 yards a catch in most of his games. It's not sexy. It's not exciting. And then he just slapped me right in the face this week with his best outing of the season, 8 for 95 in a score. He just keeps scoring touchdowns, 6 touchdowns in 8 games. His price is the season high, 59, but now it is the best matchup, one of the best matchups on the slate based on what Pittsburgh's allowed to the receiver position. Jordan Love just dropping 350 on them on primetime on the road. Like, enough can be said. DK Metcalf on the other side of that game, similar upside, similar environment. I know he's the wide receiver 1 on the team. The problem is he doesn't get the targets. And I knew that he wouldn't. This is why I didn't want to invest in him throughout best ball season. The thing is, he does catch touchdowns. So he's had 5 touchdowns in the last 6 games. That's kept his floor up. But outside of that, he's only scored more than 20 fantasy points one time. But still, 16, 19 and a half would still make me feel fine and good at just $5,500. Ricky Pearsall could return. Jacoby Myers could return. Both good matchups. If they play, maybe. They're going to be low owned. If not, I don't fault you for not wanting to play them or trusting playing those guys. It's going to be confusing seeing these two. Make sure if you invest in Kayshon Boutte or Kendrick Bourne that you click the right name. K Boutte, K Bourne, right next to each other. They're the same price. That's very disrespectful, DraftKings. I hate that y'all did that. But going to Kayshon, I mentioned earlier he had a couple duds and strings of duds, lack of targets, opportunities. And even though he's not getting more than 5 targets, he has not had more than 5 targets since week 1. Yet he had 4 touchdowns the last 3 games. His price has gone up to $5,000. It's not a great matchup. It just feels like a overexposed negative leverage play. It's not like he's going to be crazy owned. It's shown 4% owned right now according to RotoWire. But those guys, Troy Franklin, I've enjoyed his what he's done for our best ball team so far. But at this price point, it's hard to invest in him, even though he is getting all the snaps. We'll see if he has a more consistent role. I will say, Travis Hunter, not many people saw that breakout game because it was the gross blowout 35-7 shellacking, whatever you want to call it, against the Rams overseas. They have a bye, but each of the last 2 games has gotten more and more involved. Want to bring up his snap count in terms of the offensive production. So each of the last 2 weeks, he's beaten his season high of snaps. So he had 78% of the snaps in week 6 as a receiver, and then 87%, a season best, in spite of a 35-7 blowout. And so now he's all of a sudden a mainstay. Brian Thomas, I know he had a Q tag earlier. Let's see if he actually has any initial news. I think I missed anything if they did say anything. I know he left with a shoulder injury. There's been no news. He's just got a Q tag and we'll be monitoring. Hunter having 14 targets, hitting the 100-yard mark. Nobody really saw it. So I don't know if anybody's really going to look at that price tag and just be like, ooh, that's kind of cheap. But he projects really well, showing less than 7% owned. And I just want to say, that's a fun way to get to a weird game that not many people want to get to. That's a good matchup. Alec Pierce, he's been a deep play guy. He's had at least a 25-yard reception in 5 of the 6 games he's played. This Titans game, I remember when he got knocked out of this game due to a concussion, that was a 40-yard deep ball that they ruled as a catch. And then after further review, I guess it hit the ground and it didn't. So otherwise, if not for that play, 6 straight games, all of them at least 25-yard catch, most of them at least a 40-yard catch. He just hasn't scored. That's shocking to me. But 4,600, once again, it's the same matchup we just saw with Michael Pittman. That I can get with it. Josh Downs starting to get a little more involved back-to-back weeks with touchdowns. For that, he's just getting more involved offensively. 3 straight games, double-digit points. $4,400, still a reasonable price, still too cheap. Not going to be crazy owned, but good way to get. I don't really have a dog in the fight of how you want to do your double because we didn't even talk about Tyler Warren, who's been awesome as the tight end this year. Mix and match if you're going to go Daniel Jones. I might do that if I end up building with them this week. Outside of that, Juwan Jennings, based on RotoWire, is projecting well. Back-to-back games with 7 targets. He has just not produced at all. He's been bad. It hasn't been exciting to root for him because he's just the trade request saying he wants to be involved. Sound like there was some antics on the sideline, and on top of that, he's dealt with all these injuries. So he's got, what is that, a season low $4,300 price tag? So that's just not enough for me. Just wanted to say welcome back to Christian Watson. All of a sudden comes in 12.5 fantasy points in his first game back off an ACL. 4 for 85. Not a crazy ton of targets, but it was happy to see him playing this early in the season. I didn't anticipate him being back until later, if at all. So shout out to him. Darius Slayton, I know, had a long touchdown call back this past week, but if it's a negative game script, it's a higher total. So $4,100 is in the pool. And then most of these guys the rest of the way, they're just kind of dart throws. I can't really give you a dogger. I'm just saying, ooh, Trey Harris is getting more involved. Look at that first career touchdown. Or Alec Maynor, oh, he's still 38, and I think Calvin will miss. They're all just kind of, they get you 10, you'll be happy. I'll be really excited if you get 14. If I find one that I really want to stick on and hamper on, I'll tell y'all on the Sunday live stream, and we can play him and root for him together, and hopefully he doesn't break our hearts. But even if he doesn't, if we get the other guys right, it is what it is, as long as you get us a reasonable amount of points. We'll kind of scroll through the tight end position. Once again, it was criminal that you didn't have Travis Kelce, Trey McBride, and Brock Bowers all on National Tight End Day. But at least 2 of them are back this week, at least on the main slate. Also, George Kittle returned, had a 0 goose egg in his first game back, but then gets on the board in a somewhat positive game script, catching a touchdown. This one almost caught a second one. His backup tight end actually sniped him, and that was funny. $4,800 is reasonable. All these guys, Brock Bowers should return $5,000. I'm shocked that they dropped his price this low. And $5,000, I just want to say, if he's going to be less than 6% owned, I don't give a damn about his injury risk. I am playing me some Brock Bowers at $5,000 in a decent matchup in a higher total if it means that he's going to be less than 6% owned. That make of that what you will. Kyle Pitts, back-to-back strong games, 9 and 10 targets respectively. In spite of negative, I guess somewhat positive game script against San Francisco, only down 10 points, but then Miami, even in a blowout, catching all 9 targets for 59 yards. Once again, he's just not a big touchdown threat. Who knows if Michael Penix is going to be out? I don't know if there's any updated news for him. I know he had the Q tag earlier I mentioned, day to day. So we're not going to know until late in the week if he plays. I don't know if there's an elevation of confidence either way, because we saw the sample with Kirk Cousins. It wasn't that impressive last year, albeit he was injured because Pitts had his own knee injury throughout the season. And then on the other hand, you got Michael Penix, who he's been solid. At least it's more so this year. He's just much healthier, and he's healthy. He's playing. Only one game he's been below 7.5 fantasy points, and his price hasn't risen enough based on the consistency we've seen. It's not like he's a consistent, confident start in your fantasy leagues, but at least from a DK perspective, it's a good matchup. I'll take some dabs for 4,200. And then there's a lot of guys. TJ, he's too talented to be this cheap. 3,400. I understand why he is. I know it's JJ McCarthy, but damn, that's too cheap. Colston Loveland. Do want to mention Cole Kmet is going to miss time. We were waiting on a possible opening for more opportunities for him. Now that he is out of the fold, he missed last week, likely to miss more time going forward. Colston Loveland, since the bye, 42% of the snaps, 67% of the snaps, and then without Cole Kmet in the fold last week, even though it was in a loss, 81% of the snaps. I'm interested. Cincinnati dead last against tight end. Remember Thursday night, Pittsburgh, they allowed 4 touchdowns to the position. 4 in one game to tight ends. That's why they're dead last. But they've also had more poor performances against the position. So $3,300 if you're going to stack some Caleb Williams. So let's get rocking and rolling. Let's throw in Carolina's defense. Who we want to build with first? We're going to start with the highest total game. Let's go with Patrick Mahomes, who's been the more consistent fantasy option. And then I'm going to just say Rashee Rice. And I know Worthy hasn't had the breakout since Rashee's been back, but he's capable of it. And because of his dud games, since he's been back from injury, I don't think he'll be getting a lot of ownership. And I'd rather do that than go with a Travis Kelce, who he's kind of right below a bunch of names that are really outperforming. That is saying off of a big 99-yard touchdown effort. A lot of that was from a broken play where there was nothing downfield, and he was a blocker that turned into a receiver, and literally nobody was even close to him, and he squandered for yards. But regardless, he's close enough in price to Bowers, Kittle. I prefer those guys over him. I probably prefer Sam Laporte cheaper, Kyle Pitts, maybe even Dalton Kincaid on the other side of that game. Are guys I'm more interested than him. It's not like Buffalo has been terrible against the position. They haven't really allowed a breakout game to that position entirely. So probably if I'm opting for Kansas City builds, I'm going to be doing that. Or I might flirt with some Brashard Smith. In terms of Buffalo players to bring back, again, you're not going to get a lot of confident answers. Sure, Khalil Shakir. If you score, it's awesome. But if he doesn't, 11 is okay, but it's probably not going to win you a tournament. Keon Coleman has had no breakout performance since week 1, but he will be like 1% owned, and if he's the guy that breaks out, then cool. Maybe let's say Dalton Kincaid. I know he missed the previous week before the bye, came back, and in a game where they're winning 40-9, they're just not throwing it a ton. He only catches 1 of 3 targets, but pretty consistent throughout the season. Had 3 touchdowns in his first hit. And Kansas City, like $4,000, I can buy as a bring back. If I wanted to go down at price and pivot to a Juju Smith-Schuster or a Tyquan Thornton as your double, then maybe that's enough to get up to a Shakir or a James Cook. But for the time being, that's what I'm going to rock and roll with. And then running back wise, I think it's interesting. I want to try to get up some guys. Let's see if we can try to afford somebody up top. It's going to be really hard, but we can try. I'm probably going to easily gravitate towards this section, and a lot of my lineups are going to consist of a Kamani, a DeAndre Swift, and a Chase Brown because they're all positive game environments and are just kind of naturally going to fit. The thing is, we're going to lose our money real quick if we did that. That might force you to do a double tight end. If you did that, that's going down to a Colston Loveland, once again without Cole Kmet in the fold. Then you can go out to a Khalil Shakir, double bring back in that game. Jacoby Myers, once again, who knows? There's also apparently I still want to be traded, and this is the week of being traded. So you just never know with him. But Khalil Shakir, if you liked him and then you want to go a different direction tight end, you could. Wan'Dale Robinson, I did say last week he's too damn cheap, and he didn't work out. I didn't play him, but he's still fine, and he's still in the pool, and it's still a fine matchup. So, sure, if you wanted him as the last guy in. But keep in mind, though, I've got a minimum price defense, a low cheap tight end, a basically minimum price flex play, and I still had to fit in a Wan'Dale to make things work because of the prices I get up top. So I don't know what creepy shit people are going to build if they go with the Jonathan Taylor direction, because then all of a sudden, instead of Wan'Dale Robinson, you're down to a Jawan Jennings, you're down to a Marvin Mims, a Darius Slayton, Calvin Austin. So it's really hard, but I really think it's a good idea to try to fit one of these guys in here. And then I also mentioned, look at all these fun receivers up top. But in this scenario, say I went Puka, you had to you had to do double cheap running back. So if you did that, I guess Travis Etienne's there. We talked about Jaylen Warren a little bit. He's going to project well. It's in a high total game. So that could work. But you're going double cheap running back with a bunch of 30 to 40 point upside guys up top. I know the matchups aren't incredible, but most of these guys are matchup proof in that regard. So it just is what it is in that respect. Like I said, I also am interested in getting some. I think it'll be a really fun thing if you had to double mid-tier running back doing those 2 guys, because you get exposure to that game. Maybe I do something different at flex. I don't know what the hell I'm going to afford if I did that. Say you went Chase instead of Puka. You can go down, and you got to go way down. You can go with a Roman Wilson, big game last week, 4 for 74 and a score. Each of the last 2 games has combined to be about 50% of the snap. 3,300, big breakout game. Because somebody saw that game, he's probably going to have more ownership than he deserves. If he can build on that momentum, Tyler Lockett is now a Raider, and I just don't think that matters at all. If he proves me wrong, whatever, but I just don't think it matters. Sam Laporta being 4,300 is too cheap, but it's just whether or not he's involved on touchdowns, which is kind of frustrating in that respect. Let's do this, because I know Xavier Worthy, he's not a lock in all of my doubles. I think Rasheed is probably the lock in the doubles. I will eat that crow. Emery, you can gloat all you want about being right, at least thus far, about Rasheed Rice just immediately being the wide receiver 1 on the team. I think you can get away from doing a Worthy if you want to go that route. Let's say because Isaiah Pacheco is going to miss this game, let's say we get an exposure to a unique build. G. Rice, Brashard Smith. Nobody's going to play that. Nobody is going to play that. So if you're going to do that, you punt at running back, and maybe that allows you to afford more comfortably one of these guys up top. Let's put CMC back in. Let's put Colston Loveland back in as well and have a similar build to what we had last time. And 4,600. We talked about some of these guys earlier. Maybe Calvin Ridley comes back. I doubt he does because it was a hamstring. Who knows? And they also have a bye coming up. You got Keon Coleman on the other side. Go up from a Dalton Kincaid, Josh Downs, Alec Pierce. I get the theory behind both of those. Christian Watson coming off of his first successful game back. You could do that as well. I just realized I have Jamar Chase and Christian McCaffrey in this line. Did not realize I was doing that. Let's pretend you picked one or the other. So let's say you went Jamar Chase and you brought it back with DeAndre Swift. Let's say we do that and see what we're able to afford. 7,300. That's enough for Nico as a standalone. Once again, being without Patrick Surtain this week. I mean, honestly, it would be really fun to just triple dominate stack receivers up top because I love if it came down to it, I love the receivers more than I do the running backs this week. I'm just gonna say it. And so in this regard, in this event, let's see if we can flirt with getting to a higher price receiver. I don't know how we do that because we're already punting really, really cheap. Or you can do a dominant tight end also. Once again, I said I would play Brock Bowers if he does play this week. I'm not afraid of his injury. $5,000, I can deal. I can get jiggy with it. Could do that. You could do down to George Kittle, 65. That's almost enough for a Colson. That's almost enough for a Roma Dunze, but at the same time, I'm not playing 3 Bears in a lineup without Caleb Williams. Put Kincaid back in there, 7,300. I don't think we can get there, guys. But maybe we can. Let's say we go off DeAndre Swift because we already have a Bear in there, and we go down from DeAndre Swift himself, double stack Chase Brown. What is that? That's enough for Devontae Adams? I wish I could get to one more. I'm going to do that and then just say we have to do something. Maybe that's a route we go if we went with the cheaper quarterback because you could do that with a stack of a Roma Dunze plus whatever. I don't know. Let's put a button on it and we can play with something else. We can play with another quarterback and stack build. But once again, that's a pretty solid way to go. Let's pivot. Let's go to the other side of this game. So we'll go Rashee Rice. We're going to leave him in there. Probably if I'm going to be playing exposure to that game, he's probably going to be most, or if not all, of the lineups regarding this game. But let's build on the other side. So Josh Allen, let's go with Kincaid. Let's go with Khalil Shakir as the safe one. I understand if you want to go other ways. I don't think Buffalo receivers are ever going to pull a ton of ownership. So make with that what you will. I think you could go balanced. You could go, like I mentioned earlier, Swift Chase Brown route. That's $5,900 per. You can probably afford a lot, to be honest. Let's say we want 3 running backs instead of double tight end or 4 receivers. And we go him, 5,500 remainder, the last guy in. That's DK Metcalf. That's fun. You basically got, once again, minimum price defense. I'm probably going to be doing that or a cheap defense with the quarterbacks up top to afford these high price doubles. But yeah, I think that works. If you want to go down to Keon Coleman in this, just throw a quick look out there. Go away from Kamani, and you have enough to get up to Nico, Kyron Williams, Genty. Let's say you go to Rome instead of DeAndre Swift, and then you put Kamani back in. That's also viable and fun. You got skinnies of that game. You got the bring back double stack of the highest price game. 300 extra. And if you wanted it instead of DK, that could afford you Tet, Jordan Addison, Diggs, Allen. All these guys work. Don't have a dog in the fight. Can't really say one way or the other. Let's say Rashee Rice, you don't want them as the bring back because that's too obvious. You want to be a little different. Let's say Xavier Worthy is the guy you want to go to, then that's enough for Justin Jefferson. That's fun too. And if you say you wanted to get up to a big quarterback, or let's say you wanted to get up to a big running back, put back in CMC, and we might have to punt down at one position to get one more. But that would be fun if we could. Once again, if you wanted to go that route, Colston Loveland, Dalton Kincaid, I'm not going to be doing a ton of spots those guys, but you can afford it if you wanted to do that. Michael Mayer is probably cheap again if and when Brock Bowers is out. I would anticipate him playing though. Take out Jamar. Let's say you put in. I think it's going to be it's going to be weird how people gravitate toward Detroit this week because Detroit's going to have one of the highest implied totals, 9-point spread favorite, but they're all expensive except for, I guess, David Montgomery and Sam Laporta, which you can't really trust on a week in, week out basis, similar to what Jameson Williams has been. So it's going to be interesting with that. But like I said, last guys in, if you wanted, you could get up to Pittman. and that's just short of DeAndre Swift. But if you wanted to do this instead, say you take out CMC, you wanted a higher price receiver, you could once again put in the guys I told you about. $8,700, that's enough for Puka Nacua. That's fun too. And you can afford up to Alad McConkey, Chris Olave, who has been back-to-back weeks really strong. He's been a target hog all year and has really only had a bunch of breakouts, but now he's getting up to a season high 6,100. Got a new quarterback in that didn't impress too much. Now it's going against a bad matchup. I don't know, but it brings back and correlates. Sure. All right, let's refresh. Let's do a cheaper build. Sneaky stack game. I told you I wanted to get some exposure to this game, Chicago, Cincinnati. So bring back, let's say it is Jamar Chase. Let's go all the way up on him. Rama Dunze, and we'll put in Colson Loveland as the tight end at 2,000. That's going to help us afford a lot, especially when we win down at quarterback. Throw that in, and if we can go up defense, we can. 6,000. That's enough to play with to have some fun. If you want to go balance, obviously you could with the similar guys I've been building with. Let's say we go down opponent receiver, right? Go down to, we need to get some exposure to the Kansas City and Buffalo game. So we go Rashid Rice again. That's $5,400 remainder. Let's say the flex is going to be Khalil Shakir, right? $5,500 per. That is not a lot of money for running backs. If you did want to go double cheap running back, I guess ETN and Jalen Warren, it's crazy seeing him this low again, but a bad matchup. Has not been good all year in terms of a fantasy productive player. We'll probably need to get cheaper at the Buffalo exposed player. So let's go to Keon as a tournament play, right? I don't think many people are going to be playing Keon. 59, that's enough to get back up to some guys up top. So maybe you put in Warren, and that's enough for a Kamani. DeAndre Swift, if you wanted to triple, probably don't recommend that. And then Chase Brown, if you want to double bring back. But let's say that Jamar Chase is not the guy you wanted to stack with this game. Let's say you wanted to go Puka instead. Well, that's the same stuff, different day. You put in Chase Brown, 400 extra remainder. Maybe you can play around a little bit. Say you just wanted to Rice as a standalone. You can go up to whoever is 4,900. That's probably the way to go. In terms of bringing back this game, if I'm doing a Caleb double, I'm probably going to be bringing back with one of the chases, and I'm probably going to be doubling Brome and Colson Loveland, and I think it's going to be low-owned enough to where that's fine and that's okay. Let's go to another build, somebody that we haven't really been playing a ton of receivers with. Let's see what we want to do. Let's go with Daniel Jones. Danny Dimes, one of the higher total games. We mentioned it. If I'm going to do it, Michael Pittman Jr. keeps on scoring touchdowns, so let's just keep putting him in the fold. And then the next guy in, I have no confidence. Tyler Warren, best matchup, and he's 5,500. That's still reasonable. He's been awesome. Hasn't had like a 100-yard, like huge performance yet, but before last week when it was a blowout, 3 straight games with the touchdown, heavily involved. He's going to project well, so you can. I think tight end ownership is probably going to be pretty spread out this week because there's so many good options, and so it's tournament-y enough, even if you do the simple Michael Pittman Jr. and Tyler Warren. The thing is, when you're going expensive tight end, it's not like we're spending down yet. So is Daniel Jones worth going minimum price at certain spots? I don't know. But we're going to find out. On the bring back, I'm probably going to put in Jalen Warren as my preference. He's the same price as DK Metcalf, but I think it's harder in the mid-range of running back than it is with receiver. And I know that we're going to have to do some mid-price guys, and I'm going to try to spend up a little bit more in a second. But moving on, let's go back and we'll put in Kamani back in on this line. We got 6,200 per for the rest of the slate. I don't mind going double tight end when I'm going Tyler Warren, especially. So let's say we went double dominant tight end. We went Brock Bowers and Tyler Warren. I usually like doing double dominant tight ends. It's worked out before. Haven't had a ton of opportunities to do that though this year. And then that's enough if you wanted to get some exposure to the Kansas City Buffalo game. Then you go Rashid Rice. That's enough for Khalil Shakir. And then you can go up to defense. Finally, we don't want to play Carolina all the time. But at the same time, I don't know if I like them worse than the Steelers at this point in time. If you did want to do double tight end, that's still enough for a bunch of mid-tier and mid-price guys. Let's say it's you got Keenan Allen, Stephon Diggs, DK Metcalf once again if you wanted to go a different direction at running back. Let's also see if we can get a dominant. We'll do a look with a double receiver for the Indianapolis Colts to save some salary. Let's go down. We'll put in Alec Pierce for now. I don't know if there's really a dog in the fight between Alec Pierce and Josh Downs at this point. If you're looking at the last sample size of snap counts, Alec Pierce is over 80% of the snaps every game since he's been back. So he's a mainstay. He just hasn't scored a touchdown. Josh Downs has played less snaps, but he scored in back-to-back games. But they're the same price, and the way I would probably do it is just make a line to afford him. And if you prefer Josh Downs and you want to be a little bit more different, leave some salary on the table, only $200, what is that really going to afford you in the grand scheme of things? Tight end wise, let's try to fit somebody else in, somebody unique that we haven't been talking about. George Kittle's fine. If you want to go that route, I think standalone play, I don't really have a lot of confidence in many Giants in spite of the total. But with that said, nobody else does. So I understand if you wanted to go that route. Let's go Colson Loveland because I wanted to, yeah, that's exactly what I wanted to see. If you could do enough for a Christian McCaffrey and Jamar Chase, that is perfect. That's exactly what I wanted. So the only thing is you don't have any exposure to Kansas City. I don't know if I want to go 100% owned on Rashee Rice. They were worthy. I want to be overweight too. But again, it's still a risk and it's wishful thinking to assume. But I like the fact that you can get Jamar Chase and Christian McCaffrey in the same line. And it correlates a lot with a lot of positive environments. Khalil Shakir's the standalone play. If you wanted to go a different route instead of Jamar Chase and you left Colson Loveland as a standalone, then we go Rashee Rice. And to put him at the receiver position. See if that opens up something else. 61, I mean, it doesn't really, unless you wanted to bring back to be Chase Brown in terms of Colson Loveland. So that's also fun. I don't know if I wanted to go triple cheap receiver because, like I said, there are so many good receivers on the slate. But you can if you wanted to. And then also, if you prefer in a nutshell, and it's hard to even assume because projection-wise, Puka Nacua is projected for 26 fantasy points. Christian McCaffrey is projected 25 fantasy points. How do I say, oh yeah, this guy way more confident in this guy versus that guy? They're both awesome. I would get exposure to both. And in that hypothetical scenario where we put Chase Brown there. That's enough for Puka right there. And then you can go up somewhere else. You can go up to tight end, get away from that Chicago side of things if you don't feel confident with that. Hunter Henry projects well, but it's a bad matchup. Dalton Schultz, I don't know what the hell happened, but he was the chalky he was the chalky tight end last week, and he was a very big dud. So maybe that was a one-off. Maybe he just is always going to stay inconsistent even without Nico. But now that Nico's probably going to be back, don't really love it either. But yeah, 3,800 enough for all these guys. I probably say if and when Kmet is out, Colson Loveland's probably my favorite, just based on a price point perspective. And that allows you to get up. Let's say we get away from Jamar Chase. Let's say we get away back from Chase Brown. Once again, that's enough for a Kamana Vidal. I think that's fine too. One more before we get out of here. Let's do a puke stack of somebody way down here. It's gross and I don't care. Let's do this game because we haven't played enough Detroit players and I want to see what we can do because it's going to force our hand in a lot of ways if we went boom, boom, right? But if that's going to be the case, I know Jordan. We haven't seen that sample size with Jordan Addison and JJ McCarthy together, but I'd rather as a double because I went double expensive receiver up top to go the cheaper TJ Hawkinson, save $2,400 instead of Jordan Addison at 58. But I understand if you wanted to try to get both. Once again, I usually operate going cheap defense and going up if I felt like it. But because you have to go up 800 plus, it's going to be hard to even convince yourself that's even a good idea. And then in terms of the rest of the line, you can go pretty balanced if you wanted to. Once again, those three running backs I'm going to be clicking on a lot this week. Let's say we get a little different, even though we are already different playing JJ McCarthy. I'm really intrigued by Brashard Smith this week. I don't know if that's my one dog in the fire for Kansas City, but $4,200 I think is really interesting. And mid-tier running back for the first time in a while, it's just not as exciting as it was earlier in the season. But let's try to do a dominant running back, put in CMC. Actually, can we do that? Is that legal? Is that even allowed? You're probably going to have to get gross the last three. Let's put CMC in. He's going to project best. And if we're going to do that, then we got about 4,900 remainder. Running back wise, we're going to have to put in a mid-tier guy. Let's do that. It gets tough after that, though. I was going to say let's put Xavier Worthy, last guy in being Colston. Can't really do that. Actually, you could. If you want to do Xavier Worthy as a standalone, get some exposure to that Kansas City game. And then once again, Colson Loveland. I did not expect to play him a ton, but by far best matchup. Cole Kmet being out, $3,300. I like him more than all the other receivers down low that cheap. So that's fine. Let's say instead, let's try to put Rashee Rice in instead of Christian McCaffrey, right? Because that's the more confident Kansas City piece, and he's probably going to be the most popular player, or at least receiver, I would say. Let's look at ownership. Actually, Puka's showing as the most owned. So Rashee Rice, they're all going to be, plus 10%. Sprinkle them all. But if you got 3 up there, I think that's fine. And then last guy in after this is tough. I was going to hope to get doing that 2,900. I don't really want to double cheap punt tight end that cheap. Probably the lowest I'm willing to go is Colson Loveland if I'm doing another cheap tight end. But let's say I go back to Kincaid, right? Because I was playing with him earlier. $4,000, 6,100 remainder. We don't have exposure to the Chicago side of things. So once again, it just organically fit. It's going to fit a lot since they're averaging 6K a piece. So that's fun. I think I really want to prioritize getting a lot of dominant receivers this week. And I'm really excited to see what the ownership reflects. But with that said, guys, that's all I got for you. We appreciate you guys tuning in. I appreciate you if you survived through that breakdown. That was a whole lot of fun because there's just so many good names on the slate because most of them are just not on the primetime this week. Can't thank you enough. Leave a like, comment, subscribe. Let us know how you're approaching attacking the slate. Who's your most confident play? All that fun stuff. Dusty's breakdown of college football is going fantastic. Please go check that out if you can. Let us know. Shout us out if you did well on the showdown slate. Obviously, this is coming out on Friday. Game played last night, so let us know how it went, if it did go well at all. Even if it's a blowout, it can still profit. That's how we approached it last week, and it worked out that way. So love you guys. Be on the shout out for Discord. We will return after a sabbatical from live streams the last couple of weeks. One, I was sick, out of time this past week, but we will return on Sunday morning with some more live stream and talk through some lines. So I can't wait to do that. Please tune in for that on Sunday morning. And until then, I will see you guys on the next one.